As an 81-year-old widow, there are 5 costly mistakes that she wishes she had avoided in her latter years. Women of a more advanced age. What would you do if the quiet regrets of a single woman could save you years of suffering? This film presents the 5 most costly mistakes that an 81-year-old widow made. Blunders that converted her golden years into years of unnecessary strain. These mistakes were made throughout her life. The lessons that she learned the hard way will help you avoid experiencing the same kind of grief. Regardless of whether you are married, widowed, or living alone, a reckless or careless person, she was not. It's just that she didn't see it forthcoming. These verdicts were not very noteworthy or dramatic. They were inconspicuous blunders that occurred gradually over the course of time. When taken as a whole, however, they constructed a life that, as she later recognized, was significantly more difficult, more confused, and more isolating than it ought to have been. I am not trying to terrify you with this video alerting you. Those of us who wish to age properly and with dignity might use it as a soft mirror to reflect on ourselves. However, the purpose of sharing her experience is not to pass judgment, rather, it is to shed light on topics that are sometimes overlooked in discussions about getting older. By the time you reach the conclusion of this film, you will not only be aware of what to steer clear of, but you will also be able to construct a future that is more reassuring, stable, and tranquil. In addition, you shouldn't be concerned if you've already committed 1 or 2 of these errors. Any time is a good time to make a change. Continue to be with me, and I will guide you through each one using both her own words and mine. Let's get started. The first mistake she made was putting everyone's trust in her children. Since her children were her family, she presumed that they would always have her best interests in mind because they were her offspring. It is reassuring to hear that, isn't it? This is frequently the case. On the other hand, for Martha, it turned out to be the first quiet mistake that gradually stripped her of her independence. She made the decision to transfer the deed to her home to her eldest son after the passing of her husband in order to simplify the situation even further, so that someone else could assist her in paying her debts. She added another child to her bank account. In addition, she eventually ceased performing her own personal checks and balances. What started off as a convenient solution developed into silence. It is true that the bills were paid, but decisions regarding her house, her schedule, and even her medical care began to be made without her participation. The fact that her children were not unkind was never something that she noticed. They were simply preoccupied, distracted, and occasionally nonchalant about things. The phrase, "We've already taken care of it, Mom," would be heard by her, rather than the question, "What do you want to do?" In addition, she did not ask a sufficient number of questions because she had complete faith in them. The day she came to the realization that she could not make a decision on her finances without the signature of another individual was the day. Unaccompanied, she sobbed in the kitchen. It was not financial in nature. The issue was one of dignity. Most of the time, senior citizens who give up power too soon do so out of love for their children. Love, on the other hand, does not imply giving up your independence. It was a moment of confusion for Martha's children when she eventually made the request that everything be returned to her name. They were not intending to cause her any harm. It was just that they had failed to recognize how profoundly she needed to feel with the ability to take charge of her own life once more. She stated that if there was one thing she could do differently, it would be to keep assistance close at hand, but to keep decisions even closer, due to the fact that even persons with good intentions can forget that. You continue to be the one who writes your own life. It is prudent to delegate. There is no such thing as unconditional surrendering. And for Martha, the consequence of that initial error was the gradual loss of her voice, which continued until it required a significant amount of work to regain it. The second mistake is accepting feelings of isolation. After the passing of her husband, Martha was inundated with well-wishers, cards, casseroles, and phone calls following his passing. However, as the weeks progressed into months, The silence became more and more entrenched and remained. Initially, she did not seem to mind. She enjoyed the peace and quiet, the opportunity to reflect and take a deep breath, but she was unaware of the ways in which the stillness was beginning to mold her. The neighbor who offered her to join a reading club smiled and politely declined the invitation. When her friend from church called to offer to accompany her to the Sunday service, she responded by saying, "Maybe the next time." She just responded that she was too exhausted to participate in the sewing club when her old buddy from the group asked her if she would like to join again. The rejections were not final in nature. They were kind farewells, and they were gentle exits. As time went on, the invitations ultimately stopped arriving. Inadvertently, Martha had demonstrated to the world that she could function well on her own. However, she was not. When she had once welcomed silence, it turned into an echo that she was unable to escape. In a stealthy manner, loneliness crept up on her, not in the form of grief but rather as a gradual loss of color from her days. During meals, there was no talking taking place. There was no discussion before the decisions were made. It was laughter that she remembered more than anything else she had ever experienced. Not that nobody was concerned about it. What's more, she had made it difficult for anyone to get in touch with her. She was under the impression that she was respectful, not burdensome, and forceful, but even if you do so in a gentle manner, it is still seen a refusal to connect. In addition, when it is done frequently enough, it develops into a habit that is difficult to break. After some time, Martha came to the realization that loneliness is more than just a feeling of being alone. It persuades you that perhaps you are deserving of being there. The process of re-establishing those connections required time, effort, and humility. Her beginnings have to be modest. By doing things like waving at neighbors, answering the phone, and going to one church service, she gradually began to feel more like herself again. I would appreciate it if you could use the second comment section below to let me know that you are continuing viewing this video and that you are finding these insights to be helpful. I strongly suggest that you subscribe to the channel and activate the bell if you have not already done so. This will ensure that you do not miss any videos. With your assistance, we are able to continue producing high-quality content that will both inform and inspire you. Now, let's proceed with our plans. Third error. Neglecting the facts of the financial situation. Martha had never doubted her husband's ability to handle the household money. It was him who was responsible for paying the renewed bills. Their finances were maintained by the insurance company, and they made sure that their taxes were filed on time. After his death, she became under the impression that things would proceed in some way on their own. She did not open the bank statements for a period of several months. And even when she did realize what she was looking at, she had a hard time comprehending it. In addition to the fact that she failed to notice that one of their insurance plans had quietly expired, she also failed to pay bills on time, which resulted in the accumulation of minor penalties. She responded in the negative when a neighbor who was kind to her inquired if she needed assistance with anything. An embarrassment engulfed her. She was 81 years old and had experienced a rich life. In what way could she admit that she was not aware of her own financial situation? Because of this, she chose to maintain her silence, allowing pride to masquerade as dignity. The reality, however, was that avoiding a situation only made things worse. At some point in time, she came to the realization that a little inheritance that had been left to her by her husband was deposited into an account that had been debited. There are maintenance bills that are eating away at it on a monthly basis. During another occasion, she was duped by a phone fraud. Just a single phone call, and a single error. On the other hand, the price was beyond her financial means. Her children were not informed of this. However, she did not like to appear helpless. However, the silence caused her to lose her peace of mind. Eventually, Martha worked up the nerve to approach her daughter and request that she assist her in analyzing her financial situation. Asking for assistance was not a simple task. There is never a period when you are the person that others have relied on for their entire lives. However, She was spared by that little moment of vulnerability. They worked together to set up automatic payments for her bills. They went to see a financial expert. And they even canceled a couple subscriptions that she didn't realize were still billing her on a regular basis. Martha came to see that asking for assistance is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom. Financial matters do not take care of themselves in old age. Clarity becomes even more important in this context. When it comes to money, putting off confronting the truth for too long can result in stress that could have been avoided. Lost savings and sleepless nights. It is not appropriate for a widow to bear those burdens by herself. Error number 4. Allowing resentment to fester rather than allowing it to heal. In her mind, Martha did not consider herself to be furious. However, over the course of time, smaller things began to strain on her soul. There was the neighbor who stopped checking in, the buddy who did not show up to the funeral, and the distant family member who never phoned. The only thing she could say was that she was dissatisfied. In reality, however, she was in pain, and rather of working through the discomfort, she allowed it to become more rigid. She rehashed conversations that had taken place many years ago. She clung to her complaints like old mementos, and she occasionally snapped at certain individuals without intending to do so. One afternoon, her grandson came to visit, and he was delighted to share a story that he had heard from school. Martha, however, raised her voice in a stern manner when he accidentally knocked over a vase. After a moment of flinching, the young boy became silent. That night, she was unable to fall asleep. After some reflection, she came to the conclusion that her emotion was less related to the vase and more related to a burden that she had not yet dealt with. When it is allowed to fester unchecked, bitterness alters the way we perceive the world. Everything appears to be colder as a result. Each and every quiet is a feeling of rejection. Every error feels like it's done to you. The purpose of Martha's journaling was not to dwell, but rather to release. In addition to that, she became a member of a grieving support group, where she was exposed to the experiences of others who had also experienced loss and recovery. Gradually, her heart began to soften. She reached out to the pals she had been ignoring and simply told them, "I miss you." They ate lunch together the next week. The lesson that Martha learned was that pretending that the hurt never occurred is not the way to heal. The important thing is to not let that determine who you end up being. In spite of the fact that she was in a very peaceful phase of her life, she was able to regain the ability to love, laugh, and connect with others when she let go of her bitterness. I would appreciate it if you could use the 4th comment section below to let me know that you are continuing viewing this video and that you are finding these insights to be helpful. I strongly suggest that you subscribe to the channel and activate the bell if you have not already done so. This will ensure that you do not miss any videos. With your assistance, we are able to continue producing high-quality content that will both inform and inspire you. Now, let's proceed with our plans. Isolating herself from many fresh opportunities is the 5th mistake she made. In the years following the death of her husband, Martha gradually started declining invitations. In the beginning, it was because of grief. Then, it turned into a routine. It was difficult to take part in church gatherings. However, her cousin's phone calls were not answered. When she saw that the neighborhood library was offering a class on writing memoirs, she took a quick look at the leaflet and then discarded it. The thought occurred to her that she was too old to begin something fresh. When she made the decision to prioritize comfort over inquiry, however, her world shrunk a little bit. She continued to wear a robe for a longer period of time. In addition, meals became less frequent and more casual. Time seemed to pass in a blur. In her ignorance, she failed to recognize that isolation meant more than just the state of being alone. Losing faith in the possibility of experiencing new delight was the issue at hand. It was during the process of reorganizing her husband's stuff that she came upon a postcard that was from many years ago. It came from a journey that they had never gone on. He had written on the reverse that there was still a great deal to discover. Therefore, let's never stop. Her attention was drawn to something in those words. during the next community event, which was a cookery demonstration at the senior center. She registered for it. With trepidation, she went. June, a woman who had recently lost her husband, was the person she met there. As a result of their mutual losses, they became close and shared recipes. With that simple action, Martha was reminded that life after loss does not entail withdrawing from the world. It may mean expanding into new areas of development. By making the decision to participate, even when it was challenging, she granted herself permission to experience delight that she had not anticipated. The most significant error that she almost made was the assumption that her story had already come to a conclusion. On the other hand, stories do not always end in sorrow. They change and develop with time, and they are brave enough to open themselves up to something more. Lastly, some thoughts. We have a tendency to believe that the only source of wisdom is the things that we have done correctly. But the truth is that the most profound sort comes from acknowledging the areas in which we have failed and making the conscious decision to improve as a result of those mistakes. The case of Martha is not an isolated incident. Many elderly people, particularly those who are returning to life on their own after decades of being in a relationship, travel a path that is strewn with quiet, anxiety, and regret. However, just because something begins in a state of sadness does not mean that it must remain in that state. Every error that Martha committed was the result of her suffering, but each and every one of them was also an invitation, inviting one to re-engage, to reconnect, and to restore a sense of self-worth is the purpose of this invitation. It's possible that you recognize aspects of her in yourself or in someone you admire. If such is the case, accept it as a friendly prod. It is not too late. To not organize your financial matters, failure to take proper care of one's health, not to establish a routine that brings joy, in order to avoid speaking with intent, to open your heart to new friendships and new starts is almost probably not the best course of action. There is a possibility that the way forward is uncertain. Nonetheless, it is still your responsibility to proceed step by step with quiet strength. We appreciate you being here with us today. It would be wonderful if you could get in touch with us. Please leave a comment below and tell us about one item you discovered today and how you intend to put it to use in your life right now. We place a high value on your opinions, so please do not be reluctant to share them with us. Our inspiration and encouragement are greatly increased as a result of reading your remarks. I would appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, and share this video if you found it to be informative and enjoyable. With your assistance, we are able to continue producing high-quality content that will both inform and inspire you. We appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we hope to see you in the future video.